I think it should be. So for everyone who's joining, I'm very excited to start this talk today that we have Dr. Giacomo Solano here today. And Giacomo is working as the policy and statistical analyst at the Migration Policy Group. He mainly conducts comparative analysis of migration and integration statistics and policies. So, for example, for cross-migration, MIPEX European website on integration, and the mega network on migrant entrepreneurship. Giacomo holds a PhD joint degree in sociology from the University of Amsterdam and the University of Milan Bicocca. I hope I pronounced it. And with a dissertation on transnationalism and migrant entrepreneurship. In the past, he has worked on labor market integration and entrepreneurship for the European Commission, the International Organization for Migration, and Eindhoven University of Technology. Today, the talk will be discussing and presenting some of the results and what he's working on. And there will be a presentation. And then later on, we have some time to have a Q&A. Maybe if any one of you has some questions or some remarks, we can discuss those later. But I think then we can go ahead and Giacomo, you can start. I'm very happy that you could attend today, and thank you once again for willing to present this talk for us today. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Yeah, thank you very much, Amanda, for inviting me to this event. So I'm going to share the screen since I have the presentation. Okay. Do you see it? Let me just turn off the camera because my internet connection is not the best one. Yeah. Okay. Do you see the slide?
Yes, we can see them.
Okay, yes. Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So as Amanda was saying, today I'm going to address the topic of the comparative analysis of policies related to migrant and in particular to migrant integration. And I'm going to present the case of the Migrant Integration Policy Index, which is a project that we have developed at the Migration Policy Group at MPG. I want to start. Oh, sorry, I don't know why this slide. Okay, now it's working. So I want to start just to present the Migration Policy Group. So the Migration Policy Group is a research organization, a think tank that focus on migration and integration policies mainly. We also have some projects on anti-discrimination, sometimes related also to migration, but in general the main focus is on integration and migration policy. The aim is not only to do research, let's say in an academic way, but also to produce something that then can be used by policymakers, or that can at least inform the debate on the policy making on migration and integration. So what we do, so the most of our projects are analysis, so cross-country comparative analysis, mainly focusing, but not only, as you will see, on the European countries. And we run this analysis. We collect data on these countries, and we then make some comparison with the aim of creating something on informing or creating evidence for informing the debate on the topic that we address. We also rely on networks of both of country experts, but also of NGOs. First, to have a kind of in-depth, let's say, knowledge of the country, because of course, since we do this comparative analysis at the European, let's say, level, and not only, we cannot have a deep knowledge of each country. So we rely strongly on our networks of experts, like, for example, in the MIPEX that I'm going to speak about later. But also we rely on NGOs in the countries to inform, let's say, or to use our data, our findings to inform the debate in their country. So we also have an extensive outreach, let's say, power and activities, let's say. So today, what I'm going to focus mainly is on integration policy, which is already a kind of, especially the topic of integration, a kind of contested topic. So when it comes, let's say, to integration policy, we start from the definition of that I reported here of AMAR, and it means, so policies on integration are policies that, first of all, stipulate what is expected from migrants, but also the condition required to migrants to become and remain also a part of the society. So in the end, it refers to migrants' entitlements and rights in the country of destination. If you know a little bit the literature, you have read about that, you will see that there are a lot of case studies. So, for example, comparison of one or two countries, or in-depth analysis of one country only. But sometimes it's really, let's say, difficult to draw conclusion based on this unique analysis of only one country. So some researchers, let's say in the last 15 years, try to overcome, let's say, this limitation and try to conduct analysis on policies on migration integration, including many countries. But of course, this is a challenge, because when you include in the comparison more countries, you need first to have a kind of common framework, but you need also to be able, so like, for example, a questionnaire, a common questionnaire, a set of questions. But then you need also to be able to go in detail in the country to really understand the country situation. So based on these challenges, researchers have created what it's called a set of indicators. And you can see, for example, here an example of an indicator. An indicator is a question of a questionnaire. Like, for example, this is from MIPEX, and this is for access to employment in the private sector. You can see that it's a close-ended question. So you have three options of answer to this question, which is what is I call here description. And based on the situation of the country on this topic, and whether or not it's, for example, option 1, 2, or 3, we assign a score, as you see here, like 150 or 0, and then we calculate the average of the scores, and this is what it's called an index. So an index is a kind of set of indicators, and an index produces a summary score. In this case, for example, on integration of the state of integration policy in a country. In the case of MIPEX, I will come back to that, but it goes from 0, not favorable at all, the policies, to 100, very favorable. So as I said, this is very important, first of all, to get, let's say, the big picture. So to understand and compare the nature of policies implemented in different places, doing a cross-country comparison, but at the same time also to understand the evolution of policies, for example, in one country over a certain period of time, so over the years, for example. It's also very interesting for policymakers, for example, to understand the gaps in their integration framework in this case, and also the way for improvement, for example, comparing the country with another country in a similar situation. And third, it's very interesting, it's very useful, I would say, also because having this quantitative, because then in the end, the summary of this effort is one score, for example. So having this quantitative data set with scores from different countries is also useful, or it can be used also, and it has been used, and as I will show later on, by researchers to connect integration policy to what we call integration outcomes. So the real integration of the migrants in a country. So like, for example, the share of employed migrants in a country. So you can really see, let's say, thanks to these indexes, the effect of policies, and also under what condition these policies have a positive impact, so that they work. So as I said, many researchers have tried to do this and have done and created indexes in the last 15 years. We conducted, for example, a mapping in the frame of the European project that Amanda was mentioning, cross-migration. And we found that only at the national level, so at analyzing national policies on migration, we found 67 indexes, 67 set of indicators, and also additional indicators and indexes, sorry, at the national level. So you see that there is a lot of there have been a lot of projects trying to do so. However, as you can see from this review, the majority of these indexes focused on two main macro areas or macro topics: admission policies, so the one that manage, let's say, the admission of migrants in a country, and citizenship policies or residence policies. So again, related to the rights to stay in a country, as for example residence, like so residence through residence permits, or as a citizen, so through the acquisition of citizenship, so the naturalization process. You can also see that integration policies has been analyzed by quite some indexes. But again, when it comes to integration, and you can see on the top 5 topics table, when it comes to integration, the main focus is on labor market integration, while other aspects of integration like education, access to health, anti-discrimination also has been disregarded or at least analyzed to a lesser extent. Again, here you can see that citizenship is the most, let's say, popular topic. Then you have other topics like family reunification, admission, and as I said before, again, residence permit. So among these 20 plus indexes analyzing integration, we have the Migrant Integration Policy Index. The Migrant Integration Policy Index, called MIPEX, let's say, as an acronym, has been created in 2007 with the aim of analyzing the development of policy making, of policy on integration in European countries. So the starting point was really to address Europe and the European Union in particular. Then after 5 editions in 2020, we ran a more, let's say, global edition of MIPEX, including different countries, not only European, but also not only Western countries. So like, for example, now we include, well, apart from the EU 27 plus the UK, we have also other European countries, like from the Balkans, for example. We have also a traditional country of immigration, like, for example, the US, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. We included in this very last edition Southern American countries, so from Latin America, like Mexico, Colombia, Chile, and Argentina. And we also did or included Asian countries, Japan and Korea, let's say, as more developed countries, but also India, Indonesia, and China. So we're also emerging country of immigration. And I'm also happy to announce that in the coming weeks, we're going to add 3 additional countries, which I think they fill a little bit some geographical gap that we still have in MIPEX. One is South Africa, and the other 2 are Saudi Arabia and the Emirates. So as you see, we are really trying to go beyond Europe. But maybe I should do a step back and really talk about what MIPEX is. So MIPEX is, well, it's a comprehensive tool, let's say, to compare integration policies across countries. As I said, it's a set of indicators, so a questionnaire, and then we produce a summary score on integration policies in each country. But regarding the approach of integration, so we focus, of course, on integration policies. but we start from, let's say, two theoretical points. The first one is what we call the principle of equality of opportunity. So what we measure in through our indicators is to what extent migrants has the same right and opportunities and standards, let's say, compared to non-migrants. And the second principle is the principle of migrant vulnerability. That means that we start from the assumption that migrants face additional challenges when it comes to live in the country of destination compared to non-migrants, and then some additional and ad hoc policies, let's say, to support them should be created or implemented. To understand, so starting from these theoretical points and to make it more concrete, we use, let's say, or we establish some standards, some equality standards we call, based on some references for benchmark, let's say, like directives, convention, international convention from the EU, from the ILO, from the United Nations, for example. And based on this, we created our set of indicators. As I said, our set of indicators, to say our tool, we believe that it's comprehensive regarding main different points, let's say. First of all, it's comprehensive in its temporal scope or coverage. As I said, we cover a period from 2007 to 2019 in terms of assessment of countries, especially for European countries. Then we are comprehensive in the way or that we address integration. So in the thematic scope. So we focus on 8 different policy areas within integration policy, let's say, like, for example, labor market, education, access to nationality, and health. I will come back to that later. We are also comprehensive concerning the target groups. So we focus in general on international migrants, so non-citizens. So, for example, in Europe, it means also not non-European citizen. But then we look at a variety of different, let's say, subgroup of migrants, like migrants workers, family united migrants, or migrants under permanent residence, and also to a lesser extent, actually, refugees. As I also said, we focus on different countries, not only European countries, not only Western countries. In total, we have like 52 countries, plus actually the 3 that we are going to do, let's say, soon. As I said at the beginning about MPG, so we rely a lot on national experts, on our network of national experts, which are the one filling in the questionnaire, and then MPG at the central level is checking the questionnaires and ensuring that there is a kind of comparability of the data. For example, that the same situation in one country receives the same score than the situation than another country which is in the same situation regarding an aspect of integration policy. And the questionnaire is composed by 58 indicators, so 58 questions, as the one that I showed you at the beginning. Given this kind of long-standing scope, also MIPEX has been used by many and different actors. First of all, has been used by policymakers. Well, there are some examples in which policymakers, after the first assessment, the first evaluation, decide to improve their policy framework in the direction of MIPEX, because they really understood they had some gaps to fill in, and thanks to MIPEX, and so they started to discuss about that, and with also concrete results. One case is Portugal, for example, which is one now of the leading countries. in MIPEX and in integration policies, but also other countries, like for this very last edition, for example, the Minister of, I think, Labor and Integration called our MIPEX expert in Latvia, mentioning the fact that MIPEX was very useful to understand the gaps that they still have. Then it's used, of course, as a reference for NGOs, as a reference for international organizations in their documents. Like, for example, the first draft of the Global Compact of Migration was mentioning MIPEX as a powerful tool to monitor integration policies. And it's also used by media when they want to talk about integration, and also by researchers. As I said, for example, a lot of research has been done based on MIPEX and trying to link MIPEX to integration outcomes of migrants. I will show some of them as well. And here basically it's what I already said. So you see here the 8 policy areas, like labor market, family union, education, political participation, permanent residence, access to nationality, anti-discrimination, and health. And the structure of MIPEX, I already mentioned that. So we start from indicators. Then these indicators are averaged to a policy area score, and then of the 8 policy areas. And then from the 8 scores, we do an average, which is the overall MIPEX score. Again, so each indicator is ranges from 0 to 100, and also each score, like for each policy area, and the overall one is again from 0 to 100. So now I'm going more into details in this MIPEX 2020, so in the last edition of MIPEX. You can see everything. You can find everything if you're interested in that on mipex.eu. And so during the next, let's say, 10-15 minutes, I'm going to answer to this, let's say, 5 questions. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the main dimensions of integration policies that we found thanks to our assessment, our analysis. Then I'm going to illustrate the main and the different approaches that the countries have to migrant integration. Then I'm going also to show you which countries are the leaders on integration policies, as I referred, for example, to Portugal, but there are many others. I will show also the trends over time, over the last 5 years. So who improved, who undermined its policies. And then I will show more in general the international strengths and weaknesses on integration policies and in the different areas. What I showed before is the division, let's say, of the indicators of the questions based on the policy areas. We tried also to go a little bit beyond this difference or the division in 8 policy areas, and through statistical analysis, we also it's called this statistical analysis. It's called method is called principal component analysis. I think you are familiar with that. And we were able to find 3 different dimensions underlying a country approach to integration policy. The first dimension we called basic rights. So it's whether or not immigrants enjoy comparable rights compared to nationals. So, for example, here we talk about equal rights to work, training, access to health, and also be subject, let's say, or benefit from non-discrimination policies. The second dimension we called equal opportunity, and it refers to whether or not migrants receive support to enjoy comparable opportunities as nationals. So the first is access to rights, let's say, and the second one is the concrete possibilities, let's say, opportunities that migrants have in the society. So, for example, you see it refers to targets that support education or to support to access health. So the first one is the first dimension, basic rights, referred to access to health. So whether or not the migrants had the possibility to access health and were entitled to receive, for example, a support. And the second one refers to support. So if they receive support in accessing it, because we all know that there might be other barriers that migrants need to overcome, like linguistic barrier, language barriers, for example. And also equal opportunity refer, for example, also to political participation. Then the third dimension refers to what we call a long-term settlement, a secure future in the country. And it refers to whether or not migrants are supported, let's say, in their long-term settlement, and also in feeling secure and home in their country and about their future in the country. So here we refer, for example, to the possibility for family reunification, for permanent residence, and to obtain the citizenship of the country of destination. So based on these three dimensions, we also were able to create 5 different approaches to integration, or better, we can call 4+1, let's say, because the two are similar but with some differences. So the two approaches to integration share the fact that or countries in these two groups share the fact that they apply a kind of what we call comprehensive integration approach. So let's say they ensure rights, opportunities, and security to migrants to a certain extent. The extent, let's say, differentiates between the top 10 countries and what we call the comprehensive integration countries. So the top 10 countries are countries that they really invest in integration, and then migrants in that country really benefit from equal rights, equal opportunities, and security in the country. While let's say that the countries in the comprehensive integration category or group go only halfway in ensuring rights, opportunity, and security to migrants. So this is the difference, but the approach behind, or the rationale behind, is to have a comprehensive approach to integration. So they take, let's say, into account, and they invest kind of equally, let's say, on the 3 dimensions that we talked about before. Then actually the other countries, so the other group of or approaches to integration, they don't invest equally in the 3 dimensions. So they have, let's say, more developed policy in 1 or 2 dimensions, and less developed or less favorable for migrants policies in another one or in 2 others. So among these, one group is what we call temporary integration. These countries invest and ensure equal rights and opportunities, but they don't do enough, or better, migrants they don't receive enough support, let's say, for long-term settlement for security. So policies on security, on long-term settlement, let's say, are less developed and less favorable for migrants in these temporary integration countries. So the temporary is because they are, let's say, able to integrate, they are supported with integration, but then it's more difficult for migrants to settle in these countries in the long term. Then another group of countries, or another approach to integration, is what we call equality on paper. Equality on paper because migrants benefit from equal rights and opportunities for a long-term settlement, but they don't have equal opportunities. So that's why we call equality on paper. It can also be referred, let's say, as a kind of subordinate integration. So they have on paper the rights to integration, or to benefit from different services, for example, or entitlements, and they are supported with the long-term settlement in the country, but then they don't even have opportunities to be, let's say, to achieve an equal level in compared to the natives. Then finally, we have what we call an approach that we call immigration without integration. This group of countries is really peculiar because it has rather favorable policies on long-term settlement, but it's very unfavorable when it comes to equal rights and also equal opportunities. So migrants here, they enjoy really opportunities for security, for long-term settlement, but they are not really supported in their integration in the country. That's what we call, why we call it immigration. So you can you can go there and stay there, but without a real support for integration. I'm skipping this, I'm coming back to this, but before I want to continue with this topic and show you more or less the differences and the countries that we have in the different categories. So as I said, as you saw for the comprehensive approach, we sorted, let's say, the comprehensive approach into two groups. We did a little bit the same for all the other four approaches. So based, let's say, on the development of the policies, we created subgroups within these approaches to integration. Okay, I'm not going really into the subgroups, but this chart, this map, is really nice to see which countries follows under what under which approach. So you see that, for example, Asia or Asian countries in general, like starting from Russia, actually, and then China, India, Indonesia, for example, Indonesia, have mostly an immigration without integration approach. The same Japan, but its policies are a little bit more developed. When an exception is Korea. Then you see that traditional country of immigration outside Europe, like Canada, the US, Australia, and New Zealand, they have a comprehensive integration approach, and they are also in the top 10 category. The same goes, for example, with some Scandinavian countries. Then you can see that in Latin America, so in Central and South Latin America, you see that the leading approach is equality on paper, with the exception of Brazil. Brazil actually in 2014 has equality on paper approach, and then they introduced some reform, and now it's applies a more comprehensive approach to integration, and is in the top 10. Then also it's very interesting, I think, to see that there is no a common European approach, and also not even a common Mediterranean approach. So we talk a lot about migration in the Mediterranean Sea, but there is no common approach to integrate migrants that arrives in these countries. So you can see that there is really a wide range of different approaches there. Like Italy, you have more temporary integration approach, which actually is in common with some Central and Northern European countries like Germany or the UK. Then you have Portugal and Spain that they have a more comprehensive approach. The same, for example, goes with Turkey. And then you have the Eastern countries, including actually, for example, Greece, that they have a more equality on paper approach. Then I want to come back and just to show you a little video on the top 10 countries, if I'm able to do so.
I think there's no sound in coming from the video.
Yeah, but doesn't matter too much.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Indeed, I realized that the sound was not working, but actually it was just music. So maybe it was a little bit more boring without music, but still effective. So there was no person talking. It was just music. Okay, so I wanted to show you the UK and compared to Ireland, but I think we are running out of time, so I will skip that. You can just see that, as I said, that, for example, the United Kingdom has a temporary integration approach with, for example, particularly developed policies on health and anti-discrimination, while Ireland is in the top 10 with a more comprehensive approach, as you can say, but even with some, let's say, weaknesses, like, for example, on labor market mobility. So to answer to the question, which countries are the leaders on integration policy, we saw the top 10, but we can also take a more, let's say, regional group of country approach. And you see that, for example, also the MIPEX average is 50. So really halfway, let's say, developed policy or favorable policies. You see that the top countries are the countries outside Europe with a traditional history of immigration. And you see that in Europe, the leading countries are the EU15. The EU15 are, they say, the traditional European, so the old European countries in the European Union. Sorry, like, and the UK is still included since the analysis was done in 2019. So this is the situation in 2019. But you also see that if you compare the change in policies between 2014 and 2019. So this is from 19. I'm not sure if I said 19 or 14. But as I said, if we compare 2014 with 2019 and the change into policies, you can really see that countries with the most favorable policies increased or improved their policies less than countries with less developed policies, like, for example, in the case of Eastern European countries, basically in the case of EU13. For example, the traditional country of immigration, non-European traditional country of immigration, worsened, actually, deteriorated their policy approach. Sorry, I'm coming back. So you see that the average of MIPEX is, so in general, between 2014 and 2019, policies improved, slightly improved, just +2 out of 100, so not so much. There is kind of variation, but still kind of convergence in this slight improvement, let's say. But of course, there was also other or more extreme, let's say, cases, like, for example, Turkey improved by plus 17 points thanks to some reform. The same happens, for example, so quite a big improvement in Brazil, as I already said, and in Europe, the country that in the European Union, sorry, the country that improved the most was, for example, Luxembourg. On the other hand, there was, of course, countries that deteriorated their policies, like Denmark, for example, in Europe, Argentina, in South America, and Australia among the traditional countries of immigration. Coming to the last, let's say, question that I posed at the beginning, so the international strengths and weaknesses. On the 3 dimensions, you can see that access to basic rights or policies on access to basic rights are the most, let's say, developed among the 3 dimensions, while policies on equal opportunities are the least developed. And going more in detail in the different policy areas, you can see that the areas that are linked to opportunities, so to access to equal opportunities like education and political participation, are still the weaknesses among the 8 policy areas. While, for example, anti-discrimination, so which refer to access to basic rights, is the most developed. It's where policies are most favorable on average. I'm now entering in the last part of my presentation, and now the idea is to show you why, let's say, these weaknesses and these strengths are particularly important. So this is not really and only an academic effort to just show who is doing good, who is not doing very good. But this, and also it's not really an abstract kind of analysis in which, again, we say where policies are good or not. But this also, the strengths and the weaknesses have really an impact on the situation of the migrant. So we conducted also a meta-analysis of peer-reviewed scientific studies using MIPEX and linking MIPEX to integration outcomes, and also to other variables linked to migration and integration. And we really saw that the major disparities in integration policies measured by MIPEX also were reflected in the major differences in integration outcomes, and also in the attitudes that the audience and the general public had through migrants, and that also the feeling that migrants have. So talking about policies is also something really concrete, let's say, that influence, and policies then, it's demonstrated by this analysis, really influence the life of migrants. So, for example, we saw, thanks to this analysis, that integration policies really foster integration as a two-way process. So first of all, you see here this chart linking MIPEX policies and the Migrant Acceptance Index from Gallup, which measure the degree of acceptance, let's say, that the general audience in one country has toward migrants. And you can see that there is a positive relationship. And so better integration or most favorable integration policies are linked to a higher degree of acceptance in the countries. Or now we don't know who comes or what comes first, but still there is an association, which I think it's very important. Then the same goes, for example, with the happiness and the life satisfaction of migrants. So again, here from Gallup, we have this World Happiness Report from 2008, and it really measured the happiness or the life satisfaction of foreign-born residents in the destination country. And again, you can see that there is a positive relationship between policies and the happiness of migrants. So again, it's important to see how this goes together. Then also the work of, for example, of Coran Zillert showed how important is also to have good and favorable, let's say, anti-discrimination laws that covers also migrants-related grounds of discrimination like ethnicity, nationality, and also religion. You see, for example, that the migrants, the knowledge of migrants about the law is higher when policies are higher, and the same goes to the reporting rate of discriminated migrants. So you see that again there is a concrete positive relationship between the two. There are also studies that link MIPEX to migration, to health and education. You can see, for example, on the left, that both the score of MIPEX on health area, policy area, and also of MIPEX in general are positive, or MIPEX is positive related to the health condition, the reported health condition by migrants. The same goes with education. More favorable policies are linked to a higher share of academically resilient migrants, pupils, in this age. So again, you see the influence, the positive influence, the correlation that we have between the outcomes and the policies. But of course, sometimes policies are also, the relation is a little bit more tricky to understand or complex, let's say. So for example, in the case of labor market, we saw that there is a negative relationship between policies, policies and also the migrant, non-migrant employment gap. So higher employment, migrant native employment gaps are associated to more favorable policies. which it might seem counterintuitive. There are some explanation, for example, like that policies are more developed, are reactive, let's say, to the gap. So policies are more developed where migrants' labor market situation is weaker. But still, it's a complex situation, and you can see also here, for example, it's a working paper from the Robert Schuman Center for Advanced Studies. And you can see that actually the picture that I just presented of employment, it's not completely true, or we need to go deeper, let's say. So when it comes to employment, so whether or not a migrant is in employment, there is indeed a negative relationship, which is significant only for male, actually. So you see for female, it's not. But you also see that when it comes to the quality of the employment, so the occupational status, then you see that the relationship is actually positive. So we can say that probably the effect, let's say, the effect on the employment rate is complex, but then there is also a clear effect, but which work, by the way, only for male again, when it comes to the quality of this employment. So just I'm concluding. I know that I spoke for quite a lot. I want to stress that as we see in the last 30 minutes, countries have different approaches to integration. Each of these approach has pros and cons, so strengths and weaknesses. But in general, what we saw is that integration policies are developing and improving over time, but quite slowly, to a very slow pace. That the major weaknesses that we still have are on equal opportunities, and as I saw, mainly on education and political participation. In particular, it's very difficult for migrants to politically participate in the society of destination. And then we also saw that integration policies matter. They're important for integration, and especially to foster integration as a two-way process in which there is a common, let's say, understanding between migrants and the public, and vice versa. Well, here I'm going to share then also the presentation. You have some useful links if you want to know more about the use of, let's say, quantitative data and indicators for understanding migration and integration. But I'm going to conclude, and thank you very much for your attention. And if you want to just send me an email because you are interested in something more or to know something more, I will be happy to receive your email. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for this presentation. I personally learned a lot. I didn't really know about this before, and it's really interesting to see how you're analyzing the data, what the outcomes were and stuff. So thank you so much for the presentation. If anyone has some questions, we have some time to answer them now. Feel free, if you want to, you can drop them into the chat, or you can also unmute yourself, turn your camera on, whatever you feel comfortable with. So any questions or any comments to what Giacomo just presented? By the way, I think I can stop the recording just now before I forget. I usually tend to forget, so I'm stopping it just now.